Does that make sense?
Hare Krishna, everybody, and hello once again. Totally professional. Hello, everybody, you beautiful people out in YouTube land and elsewhere around the world. Welcome to the Soul Ashraya podcast, a weekly bhakti podcast where we seek the shelter, wisdom of our dear Lord Krishna through Shastra, prayer, and conversation. I'm your host, Bhakti Jake, and with me is my friend and teacher, Balaram Shakti Das.
Hare Krishna.
It is so good to see you. You have a beautiful virtual background behind you. Nah, he's actually in a park.
Almost looks like real life.
It does. It's so real. I can't believe it. So real. And
I have a bird track going as well.
The exact same background that I've had for the last 15 episodes. Yeah. There. There, now it's different. Oh, so welcome everybody to the show. We are going to hopefully be finishing up chapter 1 of the Krishna book in this episode of the show today. If you have been watching us, and hopefully you've been watching us and chanting your rounds. I know you have. We are reading from the Krishna book, an excellent book. Just for fun and just for my own sanity, Balaram,
Sure.
and because it is episode 15, and because we're gonna get into some mature, I'm gonna say spiritually mature things today in our reading. Can you just quickly give us a background on where the Krishna book came from? We know that Prabhupada wrote it, but he wrote it, did he transcribe it from other scriptures?
Yes, we've touched on this a few times, that the Krishna book is a summary study of the 10th canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam.
That's right. Yes.
So
Yeah.
the Srimad Bhagavatam, in my room, I have it there on the shelf. It takes an entire shelf, about 18 volumes, depending on how you print it. And it is replete with his commentary, but he wrote this. He started commenting, translating the Srimad Bhagavatam in his late 60s, and he traveled to America with the first 3 volumes of the first canto of 12 cantos to America at age 70, and then he continued translating and writing until his final days. And he only got about a quarter of the way through the 10th canto when he died, and his disciples completed the work on his behalf. So he wrote Krishna book because it's the whole 10th canto, and he wanted to make sure that the stories of Krishna were completed, that at least this canto, the first canto and the 10th canto, were completed, because they're the most important parts of the Bhagavatam. This is really the essence of the Bhagavatam. And so the Bhagavatam was written 5,000 years ago for the benefit of we, the inhabitants of Kali Yuga. So the idea is, or there's a verse, Kirtaneshwar knows it, a very beautiful verse that says that this brilliant Bhagavatam, which has arisen like the sun in the age of Kali will give light to those in the darkness of Kali Yuga. The idea is that this age is the age of darkness, that we're all in spiritual ignorance. And so Srimad Bhagavatam, just by reading Srimad Bhagavatam, it illuminates, it enlightens. So it was written expressly for our benefit, not for any other reason. There wasn't any ulterior, social, political, religious motive behind it. It was written expressly with our condition in mind, our spiritual depravity in mind. And then it was passed down, so many generations of discipleship, of the inner meaning, each step down the ladder of the lineage, the meaning has been preserved. And then finally came Srila Prabhupada, who was empowered to distribute that in the most kind of down to earth, understandable way for people of the whole world, not just India, those who are able to read Sanskrit, but to the English speaking world. So that's what he's done. It's for us to understand, to imbibe the Srimad Bhagavatam and try to understand its perspective, because it's giving us a real spiritual perspective. So yeah, maybe we'll talk more about that later.
I would, that was beautiful. That was a very good explanation. I would like to expand on that explanation and let everybody know that this book has come down through a lineage for thousands of years. So it's been preserved through an actual bona fide lineage. And so this is an overview of Krishna's life. And for, I guess what I'd like to say is the importance of it is the main thing here. Okay, so when we're reading these stories in this book, in this time that we're living in, it's important to remember that even though we have technology and we have things that didn't exist 5,000 years ago, this is God's story and nothing ever changes with God's story. So we're not going to just change things so that they fit our modern way of life. We're going to read the word and we're going to understand the word through God's eyes and how he would want us to interpret it, and how we're supposed to be getting meaning. And so when offenses come, if they come, that doesn't change God. And it shouldn't change us. We should understand what is trying to be said and not just change things around to fit our present age. I mean, am I right?
Yeah, I think there's
Sorry, was that a little heavy?
is there some sort of foreshadowing I should be aware of here? Well, I mean, think about, it's should probably, obvious, or just that when this is a very elevated subject matter, and so there's going to be a lot of things not necessarily offensive, but just difficult to impossible for us to understand, because we're trying to fit the world into through a rational lens, and it just doesn't work. It just does not work. And if you keep trying to do that, Krishna, by his own way, by his own sweet mystery, will trick your mind just for him to get through the barriers. He'll find a way in. It's we that have to work with him to get out of our own way of his embrace.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. So I was just kind of trying to really kind of just re-explain a quote that I had recently read from Srila Prabhupada that said that,
Mm.
you know, it's nonsense for the modern man to try to change what Krishna has already created. Just because we have all these high-tech things in a high-tech society, Krishna is, he knows already, you know, he's trying to teach us how to live and what bhakti yoga really is. So I guess in my own fallible way, I was trying to reiterate that fact that nothing, I'm trying to say that as the Lord, the supreme being, he knows that we are fallible, and he has sent us his words to study and to learn from, not to be offended from, but to learn from. So I guess that's what I was trying to say. So yeah. Okay. So good to see you, Mukunda. Thank you for joining us. Hare Krishna, my friend. Yeah, he just hopped on.
I can never see anyone that's on. I don't know what. There's a way to change how
different apps.
things,
well, let's say the invocations, and we'll get right into the word.
Jai.
Okay.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
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 Om Jnana Timirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Namo Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prishtaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Namine Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Charne Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatadeshatarne Panchakalpatarubhischa Kripa Sindhubi Evacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavibhyo Namo Namaha. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shiva Sari Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare.
Okay. Do you want to read, or would you like me to start?
I can start.
Okay.
So yeah, so last week Vasudev had concluded his conciliatory, is that the word? His trying to pacify Kamsa, right? So he makes all of these logical endeavors, words fail me, to Kamsa to spare his sister, Vasudev's wife. So, and then he finally makes a last-ditch effort in promising to give Kamsa all of their children, all of his sons, actually, all of his sons, because the prophecy was that the eighth son, right, would be Kamsa's bringer of death. So, and then that Kamsa knew the value of Vasudev's word of honor, and therefore he was convinced, yeah, Vasudeva, I can completely trust him, even though, and that's pretty amazing, like even though there's a prophecy that this man's son will kill me, I I am able to 100% trust this man. Think about that. I mean, that's pretty incredible, especially for someone as demoniac as Kamsa. To have that much faith in Vasudeva really speaks volumes about Vasudeva's character. Uh, so Vasudeva is very happy. He's like, oh, thank God. Okay, thank you for sparing us. And they go home. So beginning here, yes, page 17.
Mhm.
Each year thereafter, in due course of time, Devaki gave birth to a child. Thus she gave birth to 8 male children, as well as 1 daughter. When the first son was born, Vasudeva kept his word of honor and immediately brought the child before Kamsa. It is said that Vasudeva was very much elevated and famous for his word of honor, and he wanted to maintain this fame. Although it was very painful for Vasudeva to hand over the newly born child, Kamsa was very glad to receive him, but he became a little compassionate with the behavior of Vasudeva. This event is very exemplary. For a great soul like Vasudeva, there is nothing considered to be painful in the course of discharging one's duty. This is a really nice point here. These points Prabhupada is making. A learned person like Vasudeva carries out his duties without hesitation. So it's like, we find so many things to complain about our duty, different duties in this world, even the most simple things. Like, oh God, I have to do this. And I imagine as soon as you having to give them to someone who's probably going to kill them, like, it's like we say, like, first world problems. It's like your problems are pretty insignificant, right? But yeah, for a great soul, there's nothing painful in the course of discharging one's duty. On the other hand, a demon like Kamsa never hesitates in committing any abominable action. It is said, therefore, that a saintly person can tolerate all kinds of miserable conditions of life. A learned man can discharge his duties without awaiting favorable circumstances. A heinous person like Kamsa can act in any sinful way, and a devotee can sacrifice everything to satisfy the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So these are just a few aphorisms here, right, describing the character of different persons. So when we've all seen people of these different categories, right? We could probably think of someone who fits each of these descriptions. Maybe we haven't yet seen a devotee that can sacrifice everything, but all it takes is going to one Rath Yatra, right? They're there. These people actually exist who can sacrifice everything, right? These are swamis, right? These are great sadhus. They've literally given their whole life for the pleasure of Krishna. Whereas, heinous people, there's nothing off limits as far as sinful behavior, Okay. Kamsa became satisfied by the action of Vasudeva. He was surprised to see Vasudeva keeping his promise, and being compassionate upon him and pleased, he began to speak as follows. My dear Vasudeva, you need not present this child to me. I am not in danger from this child. I have heard that the 8th child born of you and Devaki will kill me. Why should I accept this child unnecessarily? You can take him back. So, yeah, so Kamsa here, we're seeing that his heart was actually softened. He had some virtue in his heart, actually, that, yeah, Vasudeva's honor melted his heart. And even though, that was the promise that, I'll deliver all of my sons to you, he's like, you know what, it's okay. It's okay. And he decided within himself that he would just wait until the 8th child, and then he would take that one because that's the one that, prophesied. Okay. Why don't I just keep reading
Yeah, I
the
was
next
just
one?
gonna say, if you want to keep on reading, you're a very good reader.
Oh, thanks.
Or,
When
or do
Vasudev
more
was,
and then I'll do some.
what's
Sorry.
that?
Or else do a few more and then I'll do some.
Well, I'll just do one more,
Okay.
and we'll talk.
Okay.
When Vasudev was returning home with his firstborn child, although he was pleased by the behavior of Kamsa, he could not believe in him because he knew that Kamsa was uncontrolled. So Kamsa, he had this change of heart. Vasudev wasn't getting his hopes up because he knew a man like this, he could change his mind in an instant, so he didn't believe that he was scot-free, and to start getting his hopes up that he would be able to enjoy life with his wife and child. So Kamsa was uncontrolled. It means, so this is really what this section of the Krishna book is trying to present to us, is the differences in character of different persons. So what we're seeing here is this kind of delineation. There's a man like Vasudev. He has perfectly controlled his mind and his senses, and therefore he is a man of his word. If he says something, he will hold to that. Whereas Kamsa did not have any culture of controlling his senses. Therefore, what to speak of his controlling his mind? There's no way, So he's not someone that can be trusted. He's not someone who has any honor. Yeah. So then the next sentence here: an atheistic person cannot be firm in his word of honor. One who cannot control his senses cannot be steady in his determination. So that's kind of indirectly saying here that atheists aren't able to control their senses, that they're not controlling their senses, because atheism means basically you do not abide by a higher order, abiding by a higher power, right? That's theism, right?
Mm-hmm.
To some degree or another. Yeah. So the great politician Chanakya Pandit said, "Never put your trust in a diplomat or a woman." So we'll talk about that. I'll just finish the paragraph. Those who are addicted to unrestricted sense gratification can never be trusted with any faith. All right, so there's our red flag for the day. You wanted to?
Yeah, absolutely. Wow, what a good bit there. I like that so much. So yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So the elephant in the room, to never trust a woman. It's like, whoa, what's up with that? So we should, well, there's a lot that needs to kind of be understood here. This is not saying that women are less than, or your general misogynistic verbiage. That's not the context of this statement. The context of this statement is Varnashram civilization, in which men and women have very specific roles. So it's not saying anything about their them as women as persons, because as far as persons go, we all have equal capacity to realize God in our heart, and realizing God means perfection, absolute perfection of one's existence. So if someone has absolutely perfected their existence, there's no question of whether or not you can trust them, right? That should be obvious. Chanakya Pandit was, I don't have his whole bio, but he's famous for so many aphorisms, for giving so many aphorisms. Actually, the above ones, high likelihood that he coined those. Anyway, so he's coined so many aphorisms, so many truths that are accepted as shastric. They're accepted as totally authoritative, as scriptural aphorisms.
Really? Wow.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. You'll hear his name come up a lot.
Okay.
So if Chanakya Pandit is saying something, that means you can probably take it to the bank. You can definitely take it to the bank. But B, you should try to understand it. At the very least, try to understand it. So statements like this, Prabhupada is putting this in here. He knows that this is going to grind people's gears. The point is that our gears need to be grinded. Ground? Is that our gears need to be ground?
Either way, I think is good. Really grind it, grind it up,
Yeah.
That's what I do, I just grind
So thank you. Okay, good.
front side, back side, from the old skateboard days. Front side grind.
Oh, okay. It's a skateboard reference. That's why I went over my head. So
Eat or die.
So these statements, they're again, so hearkening back to what we were saying in the beginning of the show, this knowledge is coming down from a spiritual platform to awaken us. So the point is, we're ignorant to so many things. That's why our society is so messed up. So when statements push our buttons, if it's coming from people who are ignorant, who are doing heinous things, who are just delinquents, don't give it a second thought.
Yeah.
Just keep on walking. But if it's coming from someone of very high caliber, who's been respected for centuries, millennia, and who is understood as a spiritual authority, you should let that, churn over a couple times. Give it some thought. So it's like, all right, Balaram, that's fine and all, but this statement seems pretty directly misogynistic. How can I understand this? Okay, so what would the context of this be? A woman in Varnashram society means the better half of a man, actually. I was actually reading in the 4th canto of Bhagavatam last couple of days. There's a lot of verses, the sequence of verses that is talking about how a man is not really complete, nor is a house a home without a wife, a good wife, because a wife gives a man better intelligence. So it's like right there, the wife is to be trusted. But a woman, it's like, so obviously it's saying outside of the context of one's wife, because the Bhagavatam is directly saying that one's wife is the giver of intelligence for the husband. She opens the door to liberation. So the point is that when there's statements like this that are, because there's other statements that, women are generally less intelligent than men. It's not a misogynistic statement. It's pointing to a socio-psychophysical context that women needs protection of men. And when I'm saying women and men here, I'm like, we got to really zoom out and try to understand things from a higher perspective, because what we have in our culture, I would hardly call women nor men. First of all, well, okay, let's take it to the Bhagavad Gita. In the first chapter of Bhagavad Gita, Arjuna describes to Krishna how societies get degraded. And are you familiar with this?
Yeah.
First chapter? Yeah, right. So what is he saying? He's giving Krishna reasons not to fight, right? He's saying, I shouldn't fight this war because if I do, I will deprive 90% of the population of their husbands.
Yeah.
This is a world war. Everyone was going to get annihilated. It was obvious. It's like you watch the Civil War, things, and it's just, they just line up right in front of each other and point their muskets, and it's like, oh, this is great.
Crazy.
Everyone's gonna die. Wow. What's the point of this? So Arjuna was like, look, Krishna, it says it in the scriptures that when women are deprived of the protection of a husband, so many bad things happen. Basically, the first thing is the family traditions kind of fall out of being practiced. And the point with that our teachers in Mayapur were explaining is women are more emotional than intellectual, right? Men are more intellectual and less emotional, right? And it's like, if you don't accept that, well, then, okay, I'm sorry, this conversation isn't going to get very far. But if we can at least accept that, right, then it's like, okay, there are definitely biological differences between men and women. Spiritually, there's no difference, right? So, I'm taking some time with this, being perhaps a little redundant, but I'm really just hoping that we can understand these things, that there is a biological difference between men and women, and even people are challenging that. It's like, no, like I identify as a woman. It's like, well, can you give birth? It's like, well, that's not what makes a woman. It's like, well, okay, but I mean, of course, there's exceptions to the rule. So we're not talking about that, right? Anyway, women are more emotional, less intellectual. So as far as the civilization, human civilization, which is Varnashrama Dharma, right? This is the original human culture. This is what Bhagavatam is presenting. It's presenting from the context of the original human culture ordained by God for there to be a place for everyone and for everyone to be in their place, to have their own means perfectly suited to their psychophysical constitution to make spiritual advancement. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
All right. So in that system, men would have different orders, right? And the women also, they would fit into different varnas, different classes, and the men would take up different spiritual orders: brahmachari, grahastha, vanaprastha, sannyas, based on, where they could best, meet the needs of society as well as their own, spiritual orientation, so forth. So the men would have these different spiritual orders because their minds are built for that. They're built for really analyzing things and getting into the science, breaking things down like that. When you sit around in a discussion and you talk about deep, shastric intricacies, the men get really interested and the women are like, maybe I can go, not to be cliche, but in the kitchen, or go in the living room with the ladies and talk about people's babies and stuff like that. It's not to say less intelligent. It's like, and you can quantify intelligence like that, which is generally what we're referring to with these kind of statements. But it just means that the brain of a woman, more than just the brain, the whole physical makeup, biological makeup, is just oriented differently. Their concerns are maternal, right? So Okay, so they're more interested in things of that nature. So I think there was another point in there that I'm getting where I was leading to, but the kind of bottom line I wanted to hit on was the context of trust is okay, yeah, that women need protection means they're okay, yeah. And so here it is. Where does the trust come into play? Is that if you put a lone woman in the streets, just out in the streets on her own, she's gonna get devoured because men are animals, right? I mean, let's face it. Like we know us men, like women. I think most women would agree it's dangerous to be alone in the street. Women get taken advantage of. So if you want to say women are less intelligent, or if you want to say men are more insidious, whichever one fits, whatever works for you, that's the situation. That men have that more analytical discrimination. Women have a more emotional discrimination. It's not that one is higher, one's lower, but as far as the social structure is concerned, men are meant to be on top in just a manner of speaking, right? And in our culture now, women are trying to be on top of men, but they don't know how to be on top of men. They don't have, their brains aren't wired that way, And of course, there's a lot of blurring of gender, things, and that might not be as black and white as it used to be. But what's actually happening with all that is it's not that we're getting closer to some kind of unity. We're getting farther and farther away from a real sense of social unity, because we're getting farther and farther away from traditional gender values and gender roles, because that is what is going to protect society. That is what Arjuna was saying in the Bhagavad Gita. That is what Krishna has instituted for the spiritual betterment of every human being. Men have the responsibility to take care of women. And when that happens, right, so the family traditions, okay, that's where I was going with that. The family traditions get degraded. Then what happens? Okay, yeah. So women, they like to be in the living room, with the other women, talking about families, talking about emotional things. Men like to be, organizing rituals, because men really like that intellectual exercise. Women like being engaged in rituals more than they like studying. So if you ask a woman, do you want to study a whole bunch of books, or do you want to do this fun festival, make garlands? What is she going to say? Yeah, I'll make the garlands. I'll cook the feast. Oh, you want to study Bhagavatam for 5 hours? Okay, have fun with that. Go with the other guys, So when the men get killed in the war, Arjuna was saying they won't be able to organize things like that anymore. And the women will no longer be engaged in the family traditions. Therefore, they'll fall down. So we did skits on this actually in Mayapur. A young woman, her parents are organizing a festival, and they send the daughter to get some flowers or something. On the street, some guy meets her and says, oh, pretty lady, why don't you come with me and do this and this? And she says, oh, no, thank you. I'm engaged in my family festival we have coming up. Yeah. So what were to happen if if she's a protected woman, she's married, she's bound to her family in that sense, she's under the protection of a man walks with her in the street, doesn't just send her off on her own. That never happens. That scenario never happens. She never gets deviated. What happens nowadays? They're sending their daughters to the bar every night. Go meet a husband who's intoxicated. How do you think that's going to work out? That man doesn't care for you. That man isn't going to provide for your mental, emotional, spiritual needs. No way. So what happens is the women who aren't protected, which is our culture, our society, these values have been totally, done away with, so that women are independent. What is independence? Now women aren't engaged in these spiritual family traditions. They're unprotected, they're engaging in illicit sex, and they fall down from their spiritual position and they get engaged in sinful activities. These men, what are they doing to the women? They're engaging them in sinful activity. And the women, they just play along with it. Because again, their discrimination is not on this side of the brain. It's over here. They're the receptive gender, right? Masculine, feminine natures, woman is receptive. So she's just following the men in her social circles. So it's the man's responsibility to be a man. The problem is no one knows how to be a man in our society either, because they've lost their connection with God. So Arjuna is describing this. And then what happens next? You can guess, right? What happens when men and women get together doing sinful things? Unwanted progeny, right? What happens? Unwanted progeny, the whole world falls to hell, because you're conceiving children in inauspicious ways, inauspicious circumstances, and inauspicious children are born with demonic characteristics. It's a real thing. Conception is a huge responsibility for humans. The human being is supposed to be master of this domain of earth, right? It means we're supposed to be on the topmost echelon of consciousness. So if you're having sex, if you're producing life in a very low state of consciousness, what kind of creature are you going to summon? It just doesn't take a whole lot of thought to put these things together. So when we say, never put your trust in a woman, it's like, the women are the receptive counterpart. They're not meant to lead in that way. They're waiting for a man to take the lead. This is generally speaking. If you have a more feminine affect, whatever your outer body is, doesn't matter. But if you have that more feminine affect, you're going to want to take a back seat. Whereas if you have a more masculine, drive, you're going to want to take the front seat. And when you have a marriage, this happened with, I guess I could say, my mother's parents. Her mom was a real go-getter. She was kind of alpha lady. And my grandfather, he couldn't handle that. He couldn't handle that he wasn't the breadwinner in the family. It drove him kind of crazy. He needed a wife that was submissive to him, and she was not that. So he divorced her. So this is real. Men need to feel that they're, the one calling the shots. They're in control. They're the leader. And a real woman will be satisfied by that. They'll be satisfied playing the emotional support role. If you tell a woman, like, we have this man for you, he's very good, prodigy or progeny, whatever, comes from a good stock, and he's a real leader. Everyone in his social circle admires him. He doesn't waste time. You just go on, and the woman's like, yeah, okay, where do I sign? You won't have to lift a finger. Right? Those are the natures. Those are the natures of men and women. So yeah, to just sign these kind of statements off is just a little foolish. And to try to think that, no, men and women need to be equal in all respects. I'm sorry, no. Hopefully this has brought some food for thought, because that's not what the scriptures are saying at all. They're really urging us, don't fall into that trap. There's a really nice setup for you if you go back to the traditional values. And it doesn't mean you go back to, like, the wife doesn't leave the house sort of thing, means we really need to understand these principles. And we always adjust for time, place, and circumstance. But if you start changing the principles, it doesn't matter what kind of time, place, and circumstance you have, it's not going to bring good results. So do you think I covered the actual statement of trust enough there? It's don't trust, a woman, because a woman isn't in the position to make those logical decisions like the man is. The husband, their brain is designed for that. The woman gives emotional support. But the context of this statement, once again, the context of this statement is an unprotected woman. A woman who doesn't have her better half of a husband leading her in the way of righteousness, who has studied the scriptures, who knows the path of Dharma. Such a woman is very well situated, right? And her husband completely surrenders to her. They both completely surrender to each other in that way. The man is leading, but he's following the heart of the woman. And, like that. But when a woman is not protected, she's out in the streets, and we see it. We see it happen. Women like that, I wouldn't call them a actual woman. Maybe girls, or some other words that we won't speak, right? They're devious. They're like snakes, man. They tell you they love you. I mean, just between guys here, guy talk, if there's women out there, I understand the guys in your crowd, they've been, burned probably by a few women who profess that they loved him. And then the next thing she finds someone else that she fancies, just like that, like on the drop of a dime, she forgets about her lover, her man, just totally forgets about him. It's like, that's scary. It's scary. It's like, I can't trust someone like that. That's more closer to a snake than a human being, right? So a real woman is not like that. Why? Because a real woman is protected by a real man, and we bring out the best qualities in one another, right? Unprotected woman, she has to fend for herself. It's not that she's evil. Snake, it's a little harsh. It's not. We're not quite saying that. It's a matter of necessity. Like, actually, my first crush, I was just gonna say a friend of mine, but she, actually this one girl that I knew, man, like really tough life. I loved her, but she had just the worst upbringing, that she had to live on the streets since age like 16, so just like terrible association, just always around horribly degraded men who treated her like dirt, Yeah. So like, what to expect? You can't trust someone like that, because her intelligence is just self-preservation. So her intelligence has been spoiled, right? So this is what happens when we deviate from Lord's order for society. Our intelligence becomes totally contaminated by lower values, not by higher values. You can't trust someone who's living by those, in such ways. Okay. That's,
All right. Well,
what do you
yeah, that, yeah. And we just live in a day and age where everybody is so easily offended by everything. So I mean, these are all relevant things. They're all important things to touch upon, as you just so did. And a lot of it is, there are hard truths in scriptures and in writings that just do not translate to the modern age that we're living in, especially this day and age that we're in at this moment. So these are things that people are not going to want to hear at all, but they are, like I said, hard truths. So, when women are abused, it's a very sad thing, and it's abominable I would say. And it's because a woman, they are more emotional. Their emotions run deeply. Okay. Men, our emotions do not run deep at all, Uh, believe me, my emotions don't run deep. I'm an iron worker. Okay. So yeah. So
Well, they do. I mean, just to be fair, they
surface
do.
level.
Men are very emotional as well. But the thing is, the two hemispheres of the brain, emotional and intellectual, if you will, women, they're not separated. They can't work in one or the other. Whereas men, they're very much distinct. They're either in one or they're in the other. So they can kind of just, switch to just cold. They can just get cold like that. A woman, no, like it takes a lot for her to warm up, right? Because she's not discriminating between her emotions and her intelligence. It's one thing, So they're always in that. Whereas we're not. We're usually, well, especially now, like never, practically never, in that mode. But it is there. It's there.
Well, that's really all I can say about it right now. Should we move on and try to finish the chapter?
Is Mukunda on?
Yeah.
Mukunda, do you have any comments? How'd we do?
No comments. I don't want to upset anyone.
Oh, okay, well, playing it safe.
Yeah. Well, let me just add that, this is one of those statements, one of those verses where, I don't know if anybody reading the Krishna book hasn't just like, they read that and they're like, whoa, it's just one of these, it's kind of like a landmine, where it's like, it's just such a statement, and we can tear it apart, or I shouldn't say tear it apart, I should say we can dismantle what we think the guy was trying to say and explain it. And either way, it's like no matter what you do, it's like one of these statements that is just,
And again, that's the point. Like statements like this, they're meant to kind of jar you.
Yeah.
Because we need that. We need, what was I saying just the other day? Oh yeah, like we need to get like broken out of our mechanical, like I forget how I was wording it, like patterns and behaviors. Like we're in a certain like mode with things that's very limiting, and mechanical, and and we have this very limited vision, and disrupt. We need to disrupt those cycles, those patterns. So sometimes, and we were talking about it in the context of like when you're just going about, your path, and you're doing the things, your sadhana, you're chanting, whatever, but then something terrible happens and it's like, whoa, like I thought I was connecting with God. I thought I was being spiritual. Like, why did this happen to me? Why do good things happen to bad people? Right? People, that's a big question. But the point is, it's not about bad things happening to good people. It's all about what do good people do when bad things happen, right? What happens is they go deeper. So when you read statements that are just very difficult for you, you need to make a switch. You got to switch out of the, oh, I don't agree with this. This is a bad statement. or, oh, like, why did this happen to me? That was a bad person who did that to me. No, you got to switch it out. How can I broaden my vision? How can I deepen my relationship with Krishna? Right? Those are the inquiries. Those are the movements that are going to bring you an incredible, spiritual transformation, because that's why God is doing it. So he manifests in the form of, bad things or disruptions in our life or heavy statements in the scripture. Because we need that. If life was easy, none of us would go back to the spiritual world. If it was just handed to us, you think, no, it's like, Da Vinci or Michelangelo rather, right? Sistine Chapel. God is reaching as far as he can to reach Adam, and he's just sitting there like lazy arms, like, oh God, so much endeavor, so difficult. We're lazy. We try to just bare minimum. How can I automatize myself to just press the play button and let life just spin its own wheels? Because I don't want to spin anything. So we need statements that disrupt us. We need events in our life that disrupt, because we need to get shook up a little bit, because we're being complacent in spiritual life. We need to go deeper in our inquiry. We need to go deeper in our sadhana. We need to get deeper with Krishna. And challenges are an impetus, right? Like I mentioned this several episodes ago, the word crisis, right? Crisis means opportunity. Something got rocked. Now it's an opportunity to get a little deeper.
Yeah.
So, yeah, these are difficult statements. Hopefully we've added something for contemplation. That it doesn't mean don't ever trust anything a woman says. If you take things to extremes, that's not going deeper at all. You're just staying the same. You're maybe even retrograding from your position. You're not broadening. You're not becoming broad-minded. Broad-minded means you're able to take a difficult concept and understand it comprehensively, right? So you should understand as many perspectives as you can. Women are very trustworthy. How? When they're properly situated, when they're engaged to their fullest, means they're protected, have a good husband. Generally speaking, I'm saying generally speaking, not every woman is meant to be married, not every man is meant to be married, but generally speaking, women want a man, who can be that stalwart, figure, hero in their life, right? And when, like, this is like, we've all met very more than trustworthy women, and either, okay, well, here's another thing. Yeah, not necessarily a husband, but father. If not husband, then father, right? Or at least father figure, spiritual master. Look at like, Yamuna Devi. Who's the other one? I can see her face. They never took, oh, well, Yamuna married, but other women, and just thinking about ISKCON, never married, but because Srila Prabhupada was such a father to them, they were so sheltered that their heart was completely in Krishna's hands. You think trust was an issue with them? No, Prabhupada trusted them absolutely. There was one point when he said that, who's the most advanced devotee in ISKCON? Yamuna. So yeah, putting trust in a woman, again, that's context of, if you go to just a woman on the street, or you think you're going to meet your wife in the bar, gentlemen out there, maybe give it some second thought, because Chanakya Pandit says, it's not where you mine for gold, right?
I can definitely attest to that fact. At one point, years and years ago, I was in my 20s and I made a lot of very bad mistakes, but yes, that was years ago. So moving on forward, let's
And just to kind of re-underline, the following sentence explains really, and hopefully, that this makes sense what I was saying. Those who are addicted to unrestricted sense gratification can never be truthful, nor can they be trusted with any faith. So the context is given right there. What the Bhagavad Gita, Arjuna is explaining the Vedas. The Vedas explain that when a woman is unprotected, she is necessarily, automatically, invariably engaged in unrestricted sense gratification, sinful activity. It happens. You just put a woman on the streets, come on, she's gonna have to survive, and she's surviving in a den of wolves. Animals out there. So it's like, it's not anything against women. It's a statement against men not being men, not being real leaders in society, and making it so that so many women are unprotected. So many children are born unwanted,
right.
So
it was Yamuna
this
Devi.
is what,
You talked about Yamuna Devi.
Women like that, perfectly controlled senses.
She was like the perfect, kind of like the thing to be, the example, setting the example.
Exemplar.
Right?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Prabhupada had a lot of very good things to say about her, I believe, if anyone would like to study that fact a little more. Prabhupada definitely.
Oh, he adored her.
Oh yeah, definitely. I would say so. Yes, for sure. That is.
He adored all of his female disciples. All of them.
Yeah. Oh, I'm sure he did. Absolutely. That's it. That's all the time.
Are we already out of time?
We are. We're about to be overtime.
Mukunda said in regards to Yamuna Devi, Prabhupada also said she would give her life for me and I would give mine for her. Wow. Yeah, she would give her life for me.
Yeah.
God, goosebumps.
Yeah. So yes. So let us close the show by chanting the Maha Mantra 3 times, and we will say farewell to thee until the next episode. This was a heavy episode, without a doubt. We are to just kind of capsulize this one and move on from here.
Well, I mean, thank you all, anyone who watched this, and we would appreciate comments and questions. Not that we just want to, like, this is just how it is, and no, it's a big conversation, but if you take this conversation seriously and want to deepen or expand it, definitely, as with all of our episodes, we're open to that. If you just want to troll us, like, can do that somewhere else.
You can tell us that we look like Christmas trees or something like that. One guy said that.
Okay.
So yeah. All right, let's chant this Maha Mantra 3 times, and we will catch everybody on the flip side.
Okay.
All right.
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Bol, everybody. Have a beautiful day. Thanks for watching our podcast. We will catch you later. Be blessed and be safe.